I'll actually get to that all, like, the first thing I will do. So, yeah, Frans Rosén. I work as a knowledge advisor. That means basically find a bunch of stuff that is funny and implement it to our scanner, which is like an automatic scanning tool for websites. And my, like, area of research is bug bounty programs, because they basically allow you to hack them, and if you find vulnerabilities, they're going to pay you money if you tell them first. But what you can do after that is that you can go out and blog about it, what you found, and also implement it into our product, which is Detectify. And I tend to blog about stuff on our labs blog. I've done some Slack token stuff and Chrome extension stuff, which was fun. And yeah, HackerOne. How many people know about HackerOne? Like the first time, more than 3 people. That's awesome. So, HackerOne, marketplace for security researchers that meets companies to basically help them with security. And I've been like a top-ranked guy there for a long time. I did some hacks for Slack when Slack was nothing. So that was basically why I got so many points in the beginning. And highest paid out bounty, that happened in December last year. And ironically, it has nothing to do with applications or like vulnerable applications. It was actually Salesforce login on GitHub, admin credentials for a company. And I mean, the bug bounty companies actually rank security issues in terms of impact. And I mean, having an administrator login publicly available for 9 days on GitHub is like the biggest impact you can have. So that was worth it for them. It was awesome for me, of course. So, the rundown for this hour, I'll probably talk shorter than 1 hour, so be safe. I'll talk a little bit about my background. Gonna disclose some illegal activities, but that was 15 years ago, so don't like charge me for anything, hopefully. And also how to approach a target. Like, what do I do when a company launches a bug bounty? What do I do? Like, I start my browser, then what? And free money. Sounds like a joke, but it actually is like how easy it is sometimes if you do smart things to actually earn a lot of money in bug bounties. And automation. They're combining in some ways. And also browsers, which has nothing to do with bug bounties, but it's sometimes you can actually leverage how weird browsers behave to actually abuse sites when they're doing something wrong in terms of misconfiguration. You can actually utilize some weird stuff in browsers. So I'll just talk about some fun stuff, which is still out there, still working in some browsers, so you can probably play around with it and fuck with it, hopefully. And then I'm gonna stop talking. So, how it started for me, like, how I see it when I started with bug bounties was 3.5 years ago. And what happened was I got an email from PayPal, and it said basically, we're gonna pay you for vulnerabilities. If you send a vulnerability to us and we think it's a vulnerability, we confirm it's a vulnerability, we're gonna pay you money. You don't need to be like an employee or a contractor, you just need to send an email to our security email, and then we're gonna pay you money. And I was like, holy shit, is this a thing? So I registered an account, registered a merchant account, started looking around and started like poking with it. And suddenly I see a thing that was just like, that should not be there. This is actually a security vulnerability. So I wrote a small email, like this is what you do, this is how you reproduce, this is like a screenshot, whatever. And like you should probably fix this by doing this and that. And I forgot about it. Like 2 months later, I suddenly get an email from PayPal. And they say basically, hey man, we confirm your security issue. What's your PayPal address? We want to send you $750. And I was like, what? Like, that's an email you throw away. Like, that's scam. You don't answer that. But that was true. That was actually for real. They wanted to pay me money for the vulnerability I found 2 months earlier. And at the same time, there was a bunch of companies starting the same thing, basically bug bounties or responsible disclosure policies, basically saying, hack us, we're gonna send you money or we're gonna send you shirts. And there was a bunch of companies doing this in the end of 2013, so I totally freaked out. I totally like hacked all these companies, and I've never had so many t-shirts in my whole life. Like, that was the maximum amount of clothes I've ever had. Like, my girlfriend is like, what the hell is happening? You haven't bought any clothes for years, and suddenly you have like a new shirt every day. What the hell is going on? So I got a bunch of shirts, and I got a bunch of money, and everything was cool. Like, it went a bit too far though. Like, I went to Thailand with my girlfriend, and during the stay in Thailand, I didn't bring any laptop or whatever. I had my iPhone, and like I watched on the hotel Wi-Fi some news on Twitter. And suddenly I see a company, one of these companies, launching a bug bounty. And I was like, I can't miss this. I need to do something. So I figured out a way to do a bookmarklet to view the source of the web page on the phone. So I was like spending the whole night in Thailand, sending them like proof of concepts on an iPhone for the vulnerabilities that I found. I sent them 22 emails during that night. And I went to bed in the early morning in Thailand. That's how I spent my holiday in Thailand, by the way. And I woke up in the evening, and I watched my inbox, and suddenly I had 2 emails with PayPal transfers to my account with $4,000. And that was just because this company actually validated the issues separately, because it was separate issues. And they paid out money and fixed the issues before I even woke up. So it was like a win-win for all of us. Like, they got bugs reported, although through fucking iPhone screenshots, but anyway. And I got a bunch of money to party in Thailand. Like, I had an awesome time. But how it actually started, and this is where it gets interesting. I hope nobody works at this company or something. Actually, 15 years ago, there was a company that was the Shockwave era of internet. Everybody remembers Shockwave, right? Yeah, so Shockwave was a thing. And a lot of companies started using it for competitions. And one company called HackerOne, which is basically breakfast cereals in Sweden. Looks like small pillows. And they started a puzzle. I tried to find this on archive.org, but it wasn't there. Hilarious page though. Look at archive.org for HackerOne.com back in '98. Awesome. Anyway, they had a Shockwave game, and you put the puzzle in place, and then you could send your results back to HackerOne. And how it worked was basically, when the Shockwave game was done, you pressed the button to submit the results. You transferred over to a form which had get parameters, and one get parameter was called points. And it had the points that I got from the game. So I was like, let's modify that, put some zeros after that, and see what happens. And the prize was actually money. And they actually broke the lottery law in Sweden, because you need to have some form of additions to only have a performance-based competition. So they broke the law, and I did as well. So I modified those points and submitted this day. And the day after, I get an email saying I won 1,000 kroner. And the first thing I did was reading the terms, and it said you can only win one time. So I was like, how should I do this? Go to my best friend. Can I lend your name? Can I use your name? And if I do, can I get 50% of the cut if I win? And he was like, yeah, sure, try it out. You will, Holland, used his name. And day after he won 1,000 kroner. And I was like, I can make money on this. Hilarious. 15 years old, awesomely happy with 1.5k Swedish kroner. Next day, go to my other friend, Björn. Hello, Björn. Can I use your name? You get 500 kroner for nothing. Can I use it? And yeah, sure. Use the name. Day after, he wins. Also, hilarious. Third day, let's talk with other people. Competition is closed. No date. It will never open again. And then it just closed down. And yeah, that was my attack 15 years ago. So, approaching a target. That was my background, basically. Approaching a target. Oh, shit. Exposing. GIF. Holy shit. No GIF. Okay. They are running. It looks really awesome. Fuck it. Whatever. Llama's running. So, now it's just freaking out. Oh, awesome. So you won't see me, you just watch at the llamas. Hilarious. Okay, so approaching a target. First thing I do when I launch a bug bounty program is basically just flash files. Flash files rock. Flash files is one of the best. I see why it doesn't work, because I don't have attachments. Like that. So, flash files. Best thing ever. Flash files are vulnerable almost per design. It's so easy to like decode them, look at them, and see what happens. And there's so many just vulnerable SVF all over the place. Like last week, I found an SVF on PayPal just lying there because they were using a CMS which had it as per default. And it's been there for like 6 years. Nobody looked for it. And it's hilarious. Like it was like a JW player, which is like always vulnerable. So SVFs are like the first thing I tend to look at. And not only do I look for SVFs that Google have indexed, I also look at like trying to identify what CMS they're using and then try to figure out what type of like flash files are included in that one. So we have like some people are using Moodle or like Drupal, and there's a bunch of SVFs that always are there. And also like WordPress plugins, there are a bunch of like SVFs all over the place. So that's a like low-hanging fruit version 1.0, super easy. And also fun, because you can like fuck up all the stuff, SVFs. And another thing is Facebook Connect. You have seen these buttons all over the place, like being able to sign in to Facebook, or through Facebook on a site. And two guys posted about this 3 years ago, Neil Goldschlager and Egor Homakov. You probably know about these guys. They're like famous hunters or security researchers. So basically how it works is you have OAuth implementation with Facebook. And it looks like this. This is basically a URL that you, if a customer visited, this client ID is the application that is using. So for example, Airbnb. If this client ID is Airbnb, and the user has used this sign-in with Facebook before, because the first time you do it, you need to approve that Airbnb will be able to log in you with the Facebook one. And if you then already have added it, you can actually be sent all like directly to, in this case, Airbnb.com with the access token in the fragment section of the URL. And that's basically how like OAuth works. There are differences to it, but this is one way that Facebook does it. What Facebook does though, compared to like Square or Google or LinkedIn, because all of these have like signing in with Google or signing in with Google, is that they have a wildcard pattern as per default in the redirect URI. Because the redirect URI needs to be verified. Because if it's not, that means that any page can get the access token by redirecting them to whatever page you want. So you need to have some form of validation. But the normal way of validation is having a strict validation, like example.com/login, that's the only thing that works. So what I tend to do is that as soon as I see one of these Facebook Connect buttons, I try to fuck with like the subdomain part and the path part. Because if these are not like returning you an error, that means that you can redirect the user with the token to whatever domain, wherever subdomain of example.com you want, and whatever path you like on example.com. And that extends the scope like enormously. And when I mean that, holy shit, Open Redirect is a problem again. Like nobody cares about Open Redirects, but this makes actually people care about it. So there's a bunch of like bypasses. This is like 5 different bypasses to actually get the user to redirect back to example.com. You might think like, holy shit, why? Why are like these ways like redirecting you to example.com? Turns out that browsers behave differently from URL parsers in backend code, such as PHP, Java, Perl, and Python. Like all these have flaws in the URL parser. Like the last thing that I got PHP actually to patch the backslash. If you look at the first one, what this actually means, example.com /, that will turn into a forward slash. So that will be sent to example.com / and then @victim.com. But what happens here is that the site, the victim.com site, thinks it's a victim.com domain, but it's not. It's actually like using the browser just to redirect it further. And there's some hilarious bypasses, like the 4th one. I'm actually URL decoding a forward slash 4 times, I think. 4 times, and then it was like, yeah, okay, it's a forward slash. Which is hilarious, like I want to watch that code, how that worked. But all of these examples was used together with Facebook Connect to send the access token to example.com, just to prove that any page can get the access token from the user. And getting the access token from the user basically means that you can do whatever that app can do with the user on Facebook. Basically, Airbnb has this thing where you can like publish stuff. You can get the email address, you can get the friends list and whatever. Like, depending on the app, you can get certain permissions to do stuff. One example of another way to actually abuse and create an open redirect was actually a problem in Firefox. And if you look at this header location thing, and you're like, okay, what does this mean? Basically, this means example.com, and then you have a escaped new line, and then you have an escaped like hash sign, and then .google.com. What does this mean? What will happen? What will happen? Turns out, Safari and Chrome will just, no, invalid. Like this, I don't approve. This is not a valid thing. You can't have these characters inside the domain. But what Firefox did was just, example.com. Fuck yeah. Let's send them to example.com, which is crazy. And it turns out it was actually a bug. I got a CD from it, and it was like a regression problem when working with like Punicode and like Arabic letters. They forgot about some form of escaping, so that actually escaped the domain and created a redirect to example.com. And you might think, okay, so how can we actually abuse this? Well, it turns out that Proxying, running a bug bounty program, and also had a redirect endpoint. And this redirect endpoint was pretty smart, but not super smart. So it turns out that if I use this domain as the redirect URL for Proxying, it will send me actually that as the location header. And that means basically that they think that that's a valid subdomain. But Firefox will send it to example.com. And Proxying was using Facebook Connect. So combining these two, this is the Facebook client ID OAuth URL for Proxying. Combining that with sending the guy with the redirect URI to the redirect endpoint that will redirect further away together with the token to example.com will actually attach the token and send it to example.com, and we have an account taken. So I actually showed it to them, they like paid it, and also because I was able to prove that the account takeover actually was possible, they actually like increased the reward and everybody was happy. And other stuff I tend to do when approaching a target. So open redirects tend to be like fun to find because like URL parsers suck, all this. Other stuff I do is basically just proxy the shit out of the app, like proxy everything. And then just walk through them, like go through everything and like make notes in the beginning, like what type of, like the structure of IDs is super important. Like how do you work with IDs? Are they numeric? Like that's the first warning. Like if an application uses numeric IDs, you know that there's gonna be something wrong with it. Like you can actually figure out a bunch of stuff with numeric IDs. Like you can get business intelligence data out of numeric IDs. Imagine having an e-commerce website. And as soon as you check out the order and go to the payment provider, you see the order reference. And you do that every day. And then you start figuring out how many orders approximately this e-commerce gets. So numeric IDs actually reveal a bunch of stuff, even though that's not basically a secure vulnerability, it's basically just exposing data that should not be publicly known. Basically not for big companies, as big e-commerce sites. But also the solution to that is to have hashes as IDs, like basically not being able to enumerate the IDs. That's a good thing. However, if you expose those hashes, it's basically the same thing. You still need to check that you don't have any direct object references, like being able to modify the user ID to someone else, and suddenly you can do stuff as that user, which happened with Square. So Square had this thing where you were able to modify your user. And when you modify the user, you were able to insert the new email for the user and the new password. It didn't validate what old password you had. They just had insert your new password and insert your new email. But the thing they had was they had hash IDs. So I wasn't able to actually just change the ID to something else because I didn't have anything else. But it turns out that I could Google Dork for public pages for companies using Square. And on those pages, there was a list of employees in those companies exposing the hash of all the users. So by using that in this vulnerable update of the user, I could just take those IDs from the Google Dork, use them, and just modify the email addresses of those users. And also that was bounty, of course, and fixing that. So IDs is something that I always tend to look at and like inspect and see how they work and play with them. I've seen people hashing numeric IDs, which is hilarious. Like that's just the same thing as numeric IDs. But I've seen that. Don't do that. Another thing I tend to look at is third-party scripts. And third-party scripts are the worst in terms of security. And a bunch of companies put third-party scripts on their websites. Basically, like e-commerce website, for example. They have like retargeting all over the place. They have like tracking pixels all over the place. And I tend to use these searches, like using these searches for patterns in like Proxy. And just to find out where these third-party scripts actually are getting data from. Because it turns out that a bunch of third-party scripts can actually modify the behavior of the scripts with the query parameters, which is insane. The first example was actually, I haven't told these guys, so don't expose it publicly, of course. But WebTrack, which is like a German tracking provider, turns out if you have a WT underscore report URL, you can modify the script that will be embedded on the web page to whatever you want. Like you can like plant your own JavaScript on that page, which is hilarious. And same thing with Crux. Crux is also like a tracking script. They are listening to a parameter called KXSRC, and we'll use that one instead if you like add it to the query parameter on a web page. This happens a lot, and companies are like surprised. Like this is a like secret company. You might see what it is, but I won't tell you. And they were like, holy shit, we didn't know. Like we like throw in third-party scripts all over the place, and we did not know that this happened. Another thing, and this is probably the best advice ever to actually find bugs on companies. Matthias of Lidingbrunn somewhere here, he was just like, fuck, don't tell him. Yeah, and paywalls. Paywalls is the thing. Paywalls make all the bug bounty hunters like, I won't pay you money, I want your money. But putting in a bunch of money just to get past paywalls, getting more features, will just expose you to new, more super insecure features all over the place. Because bug bounty hunters mainly are not people with money, and they're not like commonly used to actually pay money. They're getting used to getting money out of this. So paywalls is probably the best way to actually find bugs today. If you want to earn money, you need to spend it. That's how they say, right? So that actually works very, very good. Another thing which is kind of interesting is that a lot of companies implement like CSP, like content security policy, which basically means that you are preventing certain scripts from loading. And I figured out that like not only to find, like you don't need to find an XSS on these companies. Like it can be good enough to actually just tell them that there's a possible bypass to your CSP. They are interested in that as well. So you can actually start looking at companies, and this is an example of one CSP that a guy called Mario Heidrich actually made a challenge out of. He was actually like figuring this out himself, and then realizing that, okay, let's see if people understand how bad this is. So he made a page with CSP and with a super easy XSS on it, and he said like, bypass this CSP, make your script run. And one of the solutions, which was like expected, was that, okay, so Google APIs, that the endpoint actually hosts old, broken Angular like versions of Angular. So you insert that Angular script, and then you can trigger it with some like vulnerable code added to the page, because old Angular didn't have any sandbox. So you can just use that to actually bypass the CSP. But it turns out that there's a bunch of domains that people use in their CSP today, which is easily bypassed. Like Square actually posted a blog post last week. I haven't contacted them about it. I was just, I probably should, but they actually exposed in that, they actually had Google APIs in that CSP, like you should put this one in your CSP, which is crazy. But it turns out that there's many more companies, like many more domains having the same problem. So I found one company having Mixpad as like in their CSP. And I didn't find any like XSS injection or whatever. I just saw this and like I could probably bypass the CSP, which basically makes the CSP totally useless. And so I figured out, like Mixpanel, the CDN of Mixpanel actually hosts a JavaScript file that you use to track it. But it turns out it also hosts the API for Mixpanel. So you could use their API, which had JSONP that Wade talked about, and you just use the callback with a JavaScript function, and you could embed this to the CSP page, and it will just, holy shit, accepted. This is accepted. So Mixpanel had this issue. They actually fixed some parts of it, but this still works almost. And turns out there's another page, which I haven't really disclosed to anyone, so you guys are the first ones. Google Ad Services, used for like Google Ads, and like a lot of company uses this to actually like allow CSP and to allow ads in some ways. I haven't really figured out why they added, but there's a bunch of company that has added. And it turns out you're able to go inside the ads, like the AdSense of Google, and inside one of these pages you can upload HTML that should be served as an ad. And if you mix your bit with that URL, you're able to serve it under googleadservices.com. Which basically means if you curl this address right now, you will get the alert document domain, which I put there. Which is hilarious. Like, that was unexpected, but yeah, this is kind of cool. Cool way to bypass CSP. So I told one of these companies about like 2 of these issues, the Mixpanel one and the Google Ad Services, and they were like, holy shit, we did not know this. Like, they actually used CSP as a mitigation. So they were actually totally interested in bypasses to that mitigation, because they actually didn't care that much of XSSs, because they were like, yeah, we will have, our modern users are gonna use CSP anyway. But it turns out they were actually super interested in that. Something else I tend to do is like look for all the subdomains of a target possible. This works so bad. Okay, so there's a bunch of sites that you can use to gather subdomains. VirusTotal is awesome, rate IP goes up and down, but it's also pretty good at it. You can brute force, absolutely brute force subdomains. SimilarWeb, very, very interesting. We actually exposed SimilarWeb last year because SimilarWeb's intel about all these subdomains are gathered because of you having Chrome extensions that silently track it. And we figured this out because we downloaded a bunch of top-ranked Chrome extensions, and we saw that they were like sending traffic all over the place, encrypted, like sort of. But that data was, what site are you on? What site were you previously on in this tab? And like, where are you going? And every time, and all the headers, all the cookie headers, everything. So they got so much intel about your behavior, also like in cross tabs, because the Chrome extension works across all the tabs. So they got intel about like you opening a new tab, entering a new URL, or going back to another tab and then modifying the URL, because that means different stuff in terms of a user. Modifying the domain on a similar tab means it's probably related, but adding a new tab is probably separate. So they used a lot of this logic to have some really interesting data. And we actually found this out by finding our own internal test domain on SimilarWeb. And we're like, what? This is one guy on our company having this domain as a test domain. We were like, how did it find it? And we met them at a convention, and we're like, why is our internal domain here? They're like, yeah, Chrome extensions, and we're like, interesting. So we started looking at this, and it turns out they had like, some extensions had like 2 million users, 6 million users, and was just sending all these data. And when we posted this, it turned out that Google are now actually locking down all the extensions that does this. So stuff will probably happen in this area, not exposing it. Because we tested this on companies, and internal structures, internal URLs, internal subdomains that was not supposed to be out there was exposed to this. So that turned out to be a really good service. So I actually used the service, but exposed them at the same time. So I paid for it, but still just like, bad guys, but awesome. So I collect all the subdomains for all the, like, everything I could find, and then make it easy for me to just open them all over the place. Just see what happens, test them out, like try to find out the scope. Also with subdomains, I tend to like look for patterns. So I look them out and I like make requests to them and like look after different patterns. Because turns out these vendors doesn't really validate who's the owner of the domain. If the domain is pointing to GitHub and nobody has claimed it, you can just go into GitHub, create like a GH pages branch, enter a CNAME name, and just claim that domain and just place whatever you want. And there's a bunch of like services still doing it. Like S3 is doing it all the time, and like Heroku is doing it all the time. So I tend to like put this in a script, just run it every day, and then basically I get this. Like a bunch of companies like resolve to certain services which they don't really know about or care about, but you can just go inside Fastly, register this domain, and just place whatever you want on. Fastly is scary though, because that's a DNS. So you can actually point the DNS to somewhere else, which is scary. And going through this, and also one thing, the Heroku ones are actually Riot Games. And that's not because Riot Games is using Heroku. It's because my server that is running this is on Amazon. And Riot Games has some internal DNS records exposed in Republic DNS, which used in EC2 on Amazon are resolving totally other things. And I don't know really how to expose this or use this somehow, because it turns out you need to like tunnel through, like surf the web through AWS or something to get these to resolve to Heroku. But that made my server like, they are pointing to Heroku. And I'm like, no, they're not. They're private addresses. But on Amazon, they are pointing to Heroku, which was interesting. So, free money. Yay, works. Free money basically means easy money, not maybe free, but easy. So one time, with this subdomain scanning thing, this popped up. And the bold one is the one popping up. So Facebook suddenly had a pattern match for one of the patterns I was using, which was WordPress.com. WordPress.com is basically like a pro service for domains that doesn't want to host their own WordPress, but still want to use WordPress. So suddenly, back in December, Facebook was suddenly resolving to this. And if you visit groups.facebook.com, you saw this. And this is like bad news, because this means that the domain mapping was not done on this domain, meaning that you need to find a way to actually go inside WordPress and say, I own this domain. I am the owner. So I did that. I went in and said, I want to groupsfacebook.com domain, and I want to buy it to connect to my site. Turns out it gave me an error, and the error was your blog ID doesn't match what, like, you can buy this domain or buy the connection of the domain, but your blog ID doesn't match what it's supposed to be connected to, because it was probably connected to something else before. But that request looked like this. So the request to WordPress.com looked like this. You actually told which one you wanted to claim the domain and point it to a blog. But while claiming the domain, you own the domain in terms of WordPress, but you were pointing it to one domain. So basically, if you modify this ID, it said, no, you can't connect it to blog A, or you can't connect it to blog B and blog C. So I was like, so if I find the blog ID of Facebook, I will be able to claim the domain as mine, point it to a domain which is Facebook. But then I will be able to claim it further and say, no, you should not point to this one anymore, you should point it to something else. But the problem was there was 10 million IDs I need to change. So I started doing that, which took a while. And while doing that, I told everybody, like, I wrote to Facebook and said to them, like, you guys are not vulnerable per se right now, but as soon as I found this 10 millionth ID, you will. So, see you guys. And the first response I got was like, yeah, here's $5,000, we're gonna like shut it down. You're right. And I was like, that was so easy. Like, I actually didn't do it. I just like, this is how you should do it, or supposed to do it. So I was like, this is not my money, I need to donate them. So I donated them. Turns out that Facebook matches to your donation. So I'm going to DEF CON this year, and I'm going to B-Sides. So I was like, it's gonna be fun just donating bug bounties to B-Sides, because they're like very pro and very con about bug bounties. So let's donate that to B-Sides and see what happens. And they were like awesomely happy, of course, like, because Facebook doubled it, so 10K to B-Sides, which was awesome. Another story about money that wasn't mine, almost, was, I don't know if you guys remember, but Matthias and Frederick a couple of years ago, found an XSE on Google. And it turns out that it was on www.google.com, and they were able to upload an XML, and they were able to actually read local files on that server. And they got 10K, they went out to a Euro trip and like had an awesome time. But the backstory to this, I haven't talked about this before, but the backstory to this is that Friday night when they were hacking Google, they told me about it. Worst thing ever, like telling me about, like there's an XSE here. And I was like, how does XSE work? Like started reading, like, and I did the same thing. So I like, oh, they might have done this, like uploaded my own like toolbar. And what happened is that they exposed them publicly, all like, you couldn't like upload it privately, like suddenly it just exposed to everyone. So what happened was that suddenly there were 2 users uploading the etc password of google.com. There was Matthias and Frederick and mine. So what happened was that when they told Google about this, Google like, but this user, who the hell is this user? And they were like, no, this is a guy working for us, like, we know him. And they're like texting me, like, send me your IP address because they're gonna fucking sue us and kill us or whatever, we don't know. Like, tell me your IP address. And they did, and Google was like, oh, okay, then it's cool. We see that this is the guy using it. But they had my IP address at that time. And when this stuff happens, when you get an XSE, you go crazy. Like you go to every entity that Google uses that uses XML. So I started poking around with the Google marketplaces, which is basically, it's like shut down now, probably because of this, but it basically was a market platform for apps that you could, and you uploaded an XML and then you like presented what you wanted to present, like this app works like this, and you were able to add it on a Google marketplace. And I was fucking around with it with this XML. I got some weird errors, but nothing else. Like I was like, it doesn't say anything, it doesn't like expose anything, and I was playing with it for the night, and suddenly I get an email from one of the security guys at Google, like from nowhere. Like one of the, I know him from before, and I'm like, are you poking around with Google marketplaces? You know, like, and I didn't not know anything what I did. I was like, yeah, should I stop? Like, I don't know. It was like, yeah, you should. Please stop. We filed a bug for it. And I was like, for what? What the hell is the bug? I don't know the bug. And a week later, they're like, yeah, here we go, 5K. Like, what is this? Why do I get $5,000? Like, this money is not mine. They're tainted. Like, holy shit, let's donate those guys again. So I donated them to Doctors Without Borders, and they're matching also. So suddenly, Doctors Without Borders get a little email with a donation of $10,000. They're like, and it took a while. There was a guy at Google doing this called Tim Willis. And after a couple of weeks, I get an email from Tim, and he says, so there's like Doctors Without Borders won't stop calling me. And they're trying to figure out what the fuck this money is coming from. Because it looks like Google, but it says Tim Willis, and like, is it private? Is it because of something that happened? Is it like an employee donation? What is this? And he was like, no, Frans was the guy, he donated 5K, Google matches that and sent you 10K. And they're like, Frans, we have Chief of Major Donations. She wants to meet you. Mary Saxon wants to meet you. And I'm like, okay, I'm in Stockholm. Like, like, can you come to San Francisco? For what? Like, we want to meet you. Like, what do you want to do? Like, doctors, stop it. And they're like, yeah, can you please come over? Like, no, I don't talk with, no, I don't know. Just take the money. Like, I don't want to talk about this. Which was hilarious. Another thing that happened suddenly, I got an email from Square. One guy at Square, he said that basically he was looking at an internal system for on my user, and an alert box popped up. And he wanted to pay me for it. And I was like, what? And he was like, you should probably think about the pingback cross-site scripting, because if you had done that, you would have get all the data out of our internal system. Might something to think about in the future. And I was like, thanks for the advice. So I had the most awesome report on HackerOne, which is basically a mainframe meal, and they're just, here's $2,000. I love to publish this. People were just like, what the fuck? Like, Is that how you report stuff? Weird, but fun. That was very honest of them to actually do that. So automation. Automation is basically, I'll touch it a bit. What I tend to do is basically collect a bunch of stuff. Collect all the subdomains through VirusTotal, RateIP, SimilarWeb, Subroot, whatever. I strip out the subdomain part. I sort them by popularity, meaning like if two domains have the same subdomain used, resolving, I'm going to use that as a popularity increment. And then I inject www between the ones that has popularity 2 and popularity 1, meaning if I scan with this tool and always improve my list of popular domains, I know for a fact that as soon as I get down to www and it resolves, I know because I have a really long subdomain list, I know that below that the probability of subdomains being found are very, very low because there's only one domain I've found previously that had it. So I tend to use this, and this means that I get a super optimized word list for subdomains, which is very, very good for fast targeting, finding new stuff, and there's some very weird subdomains in this list. And I do this every day, on all targets, all the time. And what I do is basically resolve them, and just see what they resolve to. And as I showed you before, it turns out it ends up in this, together with my pattern matching. And what I also collect with this is requests to all domains. So I make a request to the root URL of every subdomain. I use this code, like a timeout of 10 seconds, use a content stream because it turns out that curl behaves weird when you're running it 30,000 domains all the time. But if you use streams, it works pretty good. And the cool thing is that as soon as you, I found a vulnerability in a WordPress plugin called Crayon Syntax Highlighting. And the cool thing was that because of me saving all these requests, I was able to just rep out all the domains having that plugin so I could use those, or report it back to the bug bounty programs that they had. So this turns out to be retroactively very, very effective in actually targeting applications, CMSs, identifying what sort of applications people are using, seeing trends and everything. And this is a guy with a horse. And browsers. Browsers are I want to just touch it because it's funny. I made this GIF. It's made it myself almost. And so browsers are hilarious, and I will actually just talk about Safari because Safari is the special little snowflake, and it works pretty weird compared to everything else. And back in Safari 6 days, if you look at this URL, you're like, holy shit, how can this work? You have a protocol, HTTPS, and then inside the domain you have JavaScript alert, up in the domain, and target blank. Turns out, Safari 6 did, when you had about blank, or target blank, and you clicked on this one, the first thing it did was actually selecting the URL, but stripping out the HTTP part of it. So that means if you press enter, you actually triggered on a new page, you triggered in the same context as the page you were on before, which was crazy. How does this work? It actually worked on GitHub also. They also had always target blank. So you did this with the markup. They're like, yeah, this markup is not valid, but we'll still allow it because the protocol is HTTPS. And you click that one and you press enter, and then you have a GitHub, which is what? How did that work? I told people on Twitter, they're like, you're lying. But I had a video, and I was like, no, look at this. They're like, how did that happen? And they fixed it later on. Safari 8 had also something very, very interesting. And that was basically, this looks like a self-exercise. If you open the console and write alert, it will alert. No. But the thing was, if you go to google.com, for example, and you open the console, and you write, please log a line in this console, JavaScript : alert document domain. Nothing happens. But if you make it : / and a new line, it will actually make it as a clickable link. But if you look at it, it will actually not allow, it will not include the last parenthesis. But if you code it to %29 instead, and you click on that one, and remember you're on google.com, it will actually run on google.com. And like, this might not mean anything special, but turns out, if you have mixed content on a page, what does it do? Well, it notifies you in the console. So this is basically how mixed content looks like in the console of Safari 8. So basically, it says the page that you're at are loading code from an insecure content. And this happened a lot, like this still happens a lot. And what I tried to find out is like, okay, can I inject something by using the fragment to inject my little link? So I just need to open the console and click to make the XSS run. So when I did this, like I add the fragment to my link, it actually did the whole thing as a link, which was like useless. But then I tried to like, is there some character that the URL parser in the console will like behave to as it's a separate URL? And it turned out it was like a double quote. And that means that if you are on a page and you send them to a URL with a fragment together with a double quote and the JavaScript thing, the only thing you need to do, like clicking on it will trigger on the URL that you're on. The only things that you need to do to make this universal XSS work is that you find a URL with mixed content, you use the fragment payload to inject a clickable link inside the console, and then social engineer anybody to get them to open, inspect, and click the link. And then you have an XSS. Very unlikely, but still fun. Safari 9 fixed this by not allowing JavaScript URLs from the beginning, which was good. Sad, but good. Another thing in Safari, which is very strange and interesting, is you might have heard about host header injection. Host header injection means that you're able to control the host header being sent in a request to a web page. And people have been discussing this in terms of like web cache poisoning, such as being an attacker, resetting a password on a page, but when resetting the password, injecting a payload in the host header, which will be embedded in the link when people are clicking the link on the like forgot password link. That host will be embedded on the page. Like that has actually happened with, I think it was Drupal that had the problem. But it turns out there's a super easy way, and I will expose this because nobody knows about it yet, but now you know. So it turns out if you do a location header and use the port like colon for like this is a port, but just use like characters there instead. These characters will be sent in the host header to the web page. And basically this means that if they are not sanitizing the host, this works now on iOS, Safari 9. Please try it out. It doesn't work on this Wi-Fi, the hotel Wi-Fi, I don't know why, but I turned it to the mobile phone and it worked. So it turns out that a lot of pages doesn't really sanitize this, and you can actually, but the weird thing is, Safari will clear the origin. So suddenly the location href on this page will be about blank, and the origin will be null. So basically what you can do with this attack is that you can actually plant a content extraction JavaScript and extract content from the web page. So you're basically able to like extract CISO tokens. If they don't like sanitize the host header, and you're able to use these characters because like double quote are escaped, but single quote are not. You're able to actually extract content from that web page and then send it forward to whatever you want. But the cool thing is like this behavior, like if we do Aftonbladet, which is like one of the like biggest papers in Sweden, and you do this, it turns out that you get a CSS-free version of Aftonbladet. So it looks like this today. I just took this print screen. So you get a condensed version of it. You actually break the whole origin of everything, so it's like super weird. But you should fuck with it and play with it. It's hilarious. And if you make Matthias drunk later tonight, he will say how to do it in Internet Explorer. Internet Explorer is worse because they don't escape any characters at all. So he might reveal that to you guys later. Sorry for exposing you. But yeah. One more thing. The best things ever. Like I have some like my best report I sent. The best title was to Facebook. I think it was like 1.5 years ago or something. It was actually this title. Exploitable self-XSS using clickjacking game and bypassing a filter. Like, if you read that, you just throw it away. Like, fuck. Like, self-XSS, clickjacking, like, all these super low hanging fruits. But I built a little game out of it. Like, you had a little red box, and you just drag the red box. Like, who does that? But fuck it was fun. So you drag the little red box into the input field that was behind the green little box, and then you press the yellow box, which was a submit button. And it triggered an XSS. And the best response to this was Facebook saying, like, this game is incredible. We're hardly getting any work done ever. Like, this we spent the last hour playing. And like a few days later, they fixed it and paid me like symbolic sum of a high five or whatever. And the cool thing, also the best deal I got ever. That was like I was exposing some data from a company, or not exposing. I was just telling them that they were themselves exposing a bunch of data. And they were like, holy shit, we're gonna fix this. They fixed it. I won't tell you anything more because the deal was, sign our NDA, get 5K. I was like, I will. That's the best deal I can get. Like, I didn't know anything about the data, so like, there was nothing I knew that was secret because I didn't see anything, but they wanted to make sure that I didn't expose it. So the deal was basically, don't tell anything about stuff you don't know, and you're gonna get 5K. And I was like, I'm fine with that. That's awesome. And the best bug hunting day ever, that's the story I tend to all talk about a bit. And I was actually in DEF CON last year. And what happened was there was one company that they were like interested in this with bug bounty, and they wanted to try it out. They had started like small stuff before, but they wanted to try it out on spot. So I met one of the guys working there, and he was like, can we do something fun with this? Can we meet up? We have a suite up in MGM ground. Can we bring food and booze, and you take some guys with you, and we're gonna pay you out money on spot. Like, fuck yeah. Holy shit. So I took a couple of my friends, and we're gonna do a bug hunting on spot. We went up there, and they had a filet mignon buffet. Hilarious. I'd eat 4 filet mignon, and then I'm so tired of beef. But it was so nice, and you couldn't get drunk because then you turned up very you couldn't do anything. One guy, he was drinking too much, so he was just sitting there and just laughing, hey. But I was actually really focused. It was Red Bull and coffee and stuff. So I got 6 reports out of this night. And at that time, that was the highest in HackerOne. But they paid me out $51,000 that night, which was a pretty fucking awesome day. I went home and this feels like Ocean's 11 swordfish, unreal. Whenever I'm gonna tell people, they're like, fuck you, that did not happen. That's not how it works. But it did. That's it. Thank you very much.
All right. That was awesome. Any questions, guys? There's me some.
You're so shy. Come on. Walk in.
I hope you read that NDA.
Yeah, there's ironic. You know Silicon Valley, when they have an NDA not to talk about the NDA? I actually checked that before. And the issue, I told them also, I won't sign the NDA if I can talk about the issue. And they were fine, so it's cool.
Another one? Here's your chance.
Here's your chance. Yeah, David, I would like
Access
to.
denied.
Access denied. Busy.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Frans.
Thank you.